But right now, mindful of the speech today at AIPAC by Prime Minister Netanyahu and the speech tomorrow to a joint session of Congress, let's call in our old friend Javier Manjarres, who is part of the panel today. He's joining us from our Newsmax TV newsroom. And Javier, very interested in your thoughts on this speech today.
I think it was a very poignant speech, and he emphasized that there was instances where there were serious disagreements between the U.S. and Israel, and there still is. Look, Isabel mentioned that the Six-Day War, where Israel stood alone and without anyone's help. Look, that still exists today, and this speech, it's interesting how the Democrats purposely came out and were trying to dissuade Netanyahu and Prime Minister, and Dermer from actually speaking at this, because they felt that Dermer broke protocol and it should have been the president. But then again, why didn't President Obama invite Netanyahu to speak and not as opposed to Boehner, who beat him to the punch? But I think the speech was needed to be made. I think the speech next week or tomorrow, in front of Congress, will in fact outline the failings of the Obama administration, and again, 30 Democrats are supposed to members of Congress will not be at the speech, which I think is embarrassing for the president and the whole United States. So it'll be interesting how the speech rolls out and what exactly he says about it.
Ari, we want to get your reaction now. What did you think of Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to AIPAC? We have about 40 seconds.
I had a chance to watch it. I have read the transcript of it. I thought it was a fairly exactly what I'd expect from Benjamin Netanyahu in a moment like that. Look, I think there tends to be a perception put across in the U.S. media in particular that the Jewish people and American Jews speak with a monolithic voice, and Netanyahu tries to carry that. That simply isn't true. I mean, even in Israel, Netanyahu faces re-election in 2 weeks. At a high point, at most, remember, he'll get 35% of the Israeli vote at most, right? And because Israel's a coalition government, the Knesset will be formed as a coalition. But that's on a good day. So 65% of Israelis on a bad day will vote for a candidate and a party other than Netanyahu's. And I think that's really important to remember.
It is an important point to remember. Ari Rabin-Havt, we thank you for joining the discussion. And when we come back, more with Javier and Ari as part of our political panel. In 24 hours and 15 minutes, not to put too fine a point on it, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address a joint session of Congress. Of course, we just heard him speak to AIPAC, holding its big meeting in Washington, D.C. Mindful of that, let's continue our discussion with Harry Rabin-Havt, host of The Agenda on Sirius XM Radio and former aide to Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, and also Javier Manjarres, managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog, who checks in from our Newsmax newsroom. Now, Javier, Ari was just giving us the lowdown on the many parties and the coalitions that exist in Israeli politics. We understand it is polarized. We understand there has to be a coalition government. But the notion that somehow the prime minister speaks with less of an authoritative voice because of that coalition, is that really the political reality?
Well, I agree with Ari. He's dead right on this. But again, it's not the reality. I think the majority of Israelis do back Netanyahu. Look, he keeps them safe. He's kept them safe, and we've seen over the years other prime ministers that are cut from the same mold as or same cloth as Netanyahu. They've all supported, even though there's always going to be, like any political process, there's always going to be detractors. They all back the Israeli prime minister, because they know at the end of the day, without a strong prime minister like in the U.S., without a strong American president, you face, especially Israel, you face annihilation in the Middle East.
Javier just said most Israelis support Netanyahu coming to the U.S. and speaking to Congress, but there are some that have been very critical about it, and there are some Democrats that aren't happy about Netanyahu speaking to Congress. What are your thoughts, Ari? Is this going to make us more divisive?
Look, I think this speech has been incredibly divisive in Israel. I look to people like Meir Dagan, who headed the Mossad. He's saying this is a huge strategic blunder on Netanyahu's part. This isn't an American speaking. This is an Israeli former head of their Mossad saying this is an enormous strategic blunder on Netanyahu's part, and Netanyahu's Iran strategy is wrong. You have guys like that in Israel, and that's who I look to. And when you're talking to prime ministers, I look to people like Yitzhak Rabin. I look to those people. Look, I think Netanyahu has erred in his entire approach here. I think the fact is he has been interested in creating this strategic tension for whatever reason, I don't know. And look, I think Ron Dermer, he made a mistake here, and I think he's going to pay the price for that at home.
Well, let me just ask you this, Ari. In the situation that exists, you don't believe it's of strategic importance to keep a nuclear weapon out of the hands of the Iranians, given their proximity to Israel?
I 100% believe it is of strategic importance to keep a nuclear weapon out of the hands of Iran. And I believe the way you have, basically, if you want to keep a weapon out of the hands of Iran, a nuclear weapon, you have two choices, and there are only two choices. Two choices are either have some sort of negotiated solution or some sort of military action. So pick and choose. I prefer a negotiated solution. What people on the other side are saying is we prefer military action. It's one of two choices, negotiated solution or military action, if you believe that. I think there's no disagreement that Iran having a nuclear weapon is strategically bad, not only for Israel, but for the stability of the entire region.
As we listen to, and I appreciate what you're saying, Ari, it is worth noting as we listened to the Prime Minister's speech this morning in front of AIPAC, Javier, he went through a litany of military actions that Israel conducted alone. Mindful of that, do you put any stock in the report from a Kuwaiti newspaper that President Obama actually threatened to shoot down Israeli warplanes were there a military assault on Iranian nuclear interests?
Look, if that's what they're reporting, that's what they're reporting. They have their sources. Look, I'm not going to disagree with that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. President Obama has shown that he is not as friendly to the Israeli country of Israel as other past presidents. Look, again, back to what Ari said. I agree with him on one point, and the point that the only solution here is a military solution, because you cannot negotiate with terrorists. These people have sworn to destroy Israel, to nuke them. You cannot, unless that government is completely toppled and removed, you're not going to be able to make any significant changes there. You actually need to take them out before they take Israel out.
But just to correct the record, Ari, last 10 seconds, you favor a negotiated solution, correct?
I do favor a negotiated solution, but at least Javier is being honest about the choices.
Fair enough. And on that note of brutal honesty in a tough situation, gentlemen, we say thanks to you, Ari Rabin-Havt and Javier Manjarres. After the break, the way I see it.